In this video, we're going to be breaking down 5 MLB games happening on August 18, 2026, and providing you with a side pick and a total pick for every matchup. As usual, visit our channel for the rest of today's game picks and stick around until the end because you won't want to miss out on anything. Miami Marlins versus Philadelphia Phillies. There's a certain rhythm to a series like this one that tends to reveal itself early, and Monday night in Philadelphia gave us a real preview worth paying attention to. The home side leaned hard on their ace, squeezed out a one-run win, and finally snapped a stretch of frustration in this head-to-head that had them staring at 4 straight losses to Miami. Tonight they turn to the guy who's spent the last 6 years in Philadelphia wearing the #1 label on his back, while the Marlins counter with a bullpen day. That's not spin, that's just the reality of how the mound looks. Now, credit where it's due, Miami actually walked into this trip playing decent baseball, having taken 2 of 3 from Cincinnati over the weekend, still nursing a faint wild card pulse. They've hung tough against Philly earlier this year too, which is why the season series was basically a coin flip until yesterday. So I'm not about to pretend this club can't compete. Here's the thing though, once you actually look at how this Marlins group has behaved outside of Lone Depot Park, the picture flips pretty quickly. At home, they've been genuinely tough to beat, winning close to 6 of every 10. On the road, they've been a slog, sitting well below .500 and looking especially cooked when the opponent has a winning record at their own place. We're talking about a run of 0 wins in their last 7 road trips against teams holding a winning home mark. Trends like that don't lie, and they show up right on schedule in a spot like this one. Then there's the pitching plan Miami is rolling with tonight, and honestly, it's the piece that ties the whole read together. You've got a lefty opener who was recently pitching in AAA, followed by a bullpen that has been stretched pretty thin between the injuries piling up on their relief corps and the sheer volume of games this month. That kind of patchwork setup can absolutely work on the right night, but the right night usually doesn't involve walking into a park that plays cozy for left-handed power against a lineup that finally started looking dangerous during last week's Twins sweep. Even mid-pack lineups look mean when you're asking a relay of arms to keep them off the board for 9 innings. And the guy going for Philadelphia has been a nightmare for divisional opponents all year. Wins have piled up at something like a 7-1 clip across his last 8 starts inside the National League East. He's still missing bats at an elite rate, still living in the strike zone, and even with a couple of shakier outings recently, the underlying stuff hasn't moved. I'll admit the counter-argument here is fair. These same Marlins beat him up during that Miami series a few weeks back, tagging him for a crooked number inside 3 innings before he came out. His August line is a little uglier than the season number would suggest. That's real, but that outing was in a different park, in different air, and with a Philadelphia lineup that was mid-slump. Tonight he's home, backed by a crowd that's watched this team claw its way back into a wild card seat, and staring across at a Miami group that just has no business winning behind a bullpen game on the road in this ballpark. Everything about the setup points the same way. A rested Phillies pen behind a proven ace, a lineup finally putting some good at-bats together, and an opponent that has flat out not been able to close the deal as visitors against decent competition. Take the insurance. As our first pick for this matchup, the Philadelphia Phillies to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Runs are the other question here, and this one's got some layers you need to unpack before drawing a conclusion. Anytime this ballpark comes up, folks anchor immediately to home runs, and yeah, Citizens Bank Park can genuinely play as a launch pad when the wind cooperates. The last 10 meetings between these clubs in Philadelphia have leaned toward more scoring rather than less, so I'm not going to pretend that history isn't sitting there. You should look right at it. But when you actually break down the arithmetic on the mound tonight, the run environment tilts the other way in a hurry. The right-hander getting the ball for the home side has been carving through lineups all year with a sub-3 earned run mark and better than 10 strikeouts per 9. That's not a profile that gives up crooked numbers. That's the kind of profile that turns a game into a chess match by the 4th inning. Hitters end up in 2-strike counts, chasing something with movement, walking back to the dugout shaking their heads. On the other side of the ball, this isn't exactly a Miami offense that scares people on the road either. They score fewer than 4 runs a game as visitors, and while they've got a couple of names that can heat up, the lineup as a whole isn't built to string together long innings against a rotation arm. The Phillies' bats are dangerous in bursts, sure, but as a 9-man unit they've been middle of the pack in scoring, leaning on the occasional big swing rather than avalanche innings. Add in a Miami plan that's basically an opener asked to give you an inning or 2 before the bullpen carousel starts, and there's a real chance the first few frames stay quiet on both sides. Then you factor in the trends showing up across multiple slices of the schedule. Tuesday night games have gone the underway in 6 of the last 6 for Philadelphia at home. Miami on Tuesdays has been the same story, 4 of 4 staying under recently. And Miami on the road against right-handed starters has essentially been an under machine, hitting the under in 8 of their last 9 such trips. That's not one cherry-picked stat. That's the same message showing up from 3 different angles. The weather actually plays along too. It's a warm summer evening in Philadelphia, sure, but the wind is light and not doing anyone any favors carrying balls to the seats. There's a chance of storms rolling in overnight, but nothing at first pitch that's going to turn this into a track meet. Neutral conditions favor the arm that actually knows where the ball is going. I want to give the other side its due one more time because it's an honest counter. Recent meetings in this park have produced runs. One huge inning from either lineup flips this whole read on its head. And this is baseball, so weird stuff happens. You can absolutely construct a night where a Miami rally against the Phillies pen combines with a Bryce Harper solo shot to push this well over the number. Still, when you actually weigh a pitcher humming in rhythm against a road offense that has been quiet as a mouse this year and a piecemeal bullpen strategy that's more about survival than dominance, the math points closer to a tidy 4-2 final than a wild 7-5 slugfest. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Quick commercial break. You know the deal. If you want to get our exclusive best sport picks to take things to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Go check it out. Commercial break over. Now back to the game. Arizona Diamondbacks versus Boston Red Sox. Not gonna lie, Monday night at Fenway was rough for the visiting side. Getting steamrolled in a series opener has a way of coloring how a market feels about the very next night's game. And honestly, that is exactly where the setup starts getting interesting. Overreactions from bettors and books alike are just a fact of life this time of year, and this one feels like textbook territory for one of those. Here is the thing about the guy Boston is running out there tonight. He is still finding his footing after a summer stint on the injured list with a groin issue, and his outings since coming back have been carefully managed. Shorter leashes, tighter pitch counts, the whole tune-up dance. That almost always leaks into the game plan, which means Boston's bullpen is going to shoulder more than a manager would typically like on a Tuesday night. And about that bullpen, a couple of the key setup arms have landed on the shelf lately with elbow trouble, and the depth chart behind them starts looking a little threadbare once you drop past the top options. Fenway late innings, with a crowd expecting a smooth handoff, can turn quickly when the leverage guys aren't fully available. On the other side of the diamond, Arizona is turning to a grizzled veteran who has walked through just about every hallway this sport has. His earned run average on the year isn't going to make anyone giddy, sure, and nobody is calling him an ace at this stage of his career. But this is a pitcher with real October scars, someone who has held his own on the biggest stages the game offers against superstar lineups. Even on the nights his stuff isn't fooling anyone, he tends to keep the innings from ballooning into disasters. That kind of style has a way of keeping teams within striking distance, even in the games they probably shouldn't be. And you can't talk about the guys from the desert without pointing directly at Corbin Carroll. He just picked up National League Player of the Week honors, and the numbers behind that award are borderline video game stuff. Extra base hits stacking up in bunches, and OPS shooting into the stratosphere, the whole package firing at once. When your top-of-the-order engine is running that hot, runs tend to find their way onto the board. It is the kind of stretch that reshapes the entire math of a lineup, even one dealing with a notable absence in the middle of the order. Boston at home this year has not been the fortress you would expect either. Their record inside their own park hovers right around break-even, and the recent stretch of results has looked more shaky than swaggering. Arizona plays better on the road than the standings might suggest at first glance, and this feels like the type of spot where the number on the board is a little kinder than the reality of the matchup underneath it. As our first pick for this matchup, the Arizona Diamondbacks to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Fenway Park itself is always the first conversation when the topic turns to run scoring. That famous green wall in left field turns routine fly balls into doubles, gap shots into extra bases, and pitchers into cautious versions of themselves. Balls that die peacefully in the outfield of a newer park find fresh life here in a way that scrambles a lot of pregame pitching plans. Tonight's forecast calls for a mild summer evening, temperatures dipping into the low 70s with an east-northeast breeze around 7 miles per hour and gusts reaching into the mid-teens. Wind flowing off that direction at this Balliard has historically played neutral and at times a touch friendly to the offenses, especially for hitters with the swing plane to punish the pull side. The pitching side of it stacks the deck for run scoring even further. The righty for the road team has been trending toward hittable in a lot of his outings this year, with a WHIP that suggests plenty of traffic on the bases just about every trip through the order. The lefty for the home side, meanwhile, is still stretching back toward a normal workload after his summer injury layoff, and his last few starts have all wrapped up a bit earlier than a manager would typically prefer. Both dugouts figure to reach into their bullpens a little sooner than they would like, and both of those bullpens have been leaned on heavily over the past stretch of games. The lineup wearing the home whites just hung double digits on the scoreboard the night before this one. It would be silly to expect a carbon copy of that outburst, sure, but offenses have a way of riding momentum from one game to the next, especially at home where the environment feeds directly into their strengths. The heart of that batting order carries some serious punch, plus a catcher who has been mashing all year long. The visiting bats have plenty of noise in them too, injuries aside. This is a group that ranks comfortably in the upper half of the league in run production, and once they get to the middle innings against a home bullpen missing a couple of its core arms, real opportunities start opening up. Sequences that fizzle against a fully rested pen have a habit of turning into 3- and 4-run frames when the guys warming up have already thrown on back-to-back-to-back days. There is a fair counterpoint worth acknowledging out loud here. The visitors were held to a single run in Monday's opener, so an argument exists that the offense just isn't clicking right now. But that game was shaped by a very specific pitching matchup, and bounce-back performances are one of the more reliable patterns you will find across a long baseball summer. Toss in a park that regularly spits out crooked numbers, taxed bullpens on both benches, and a couple of red-hot bats swinging with real intent at the top of a lineup, and the arithmetic here starts leaning one way pretty firmly. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. San Diego Padres versus New York Mets. Some games telegraph their story before first pitch, and this one has that vibe. The visitors are coming off a night where their bats never really got going, and now they're handing the ball to a veteran left-hander who's still adjusting to new scenery after a deadline move. Through his first couple of turns in his fresh uniform, he's looked more like a pitcher searching for his release point than the guy who was overwhelming West Coast hitters earlier in the summer. Free passes have been the shadow following him around all year, and heading into a park where the home crowd loves nothing more than an unraveled arm, that little wrinkle keeps whispering at me. Now, credit where it's due. The visiting club has genuinely been one of the hottest teams in the sport since late July, and their name recognition alone can trick you into fading the local side. But the group in the home dugout is playing crisp, situationally sharp baseball, having taken 9 of their last dozen and opening this series with a defensive clinic that saw 2 runners thrown out at the plate on back-to-back plays. They're not the same rudderless team we watched melt down earlier in the summer, and the internal narrative around this ball club has quietly flipped. They're catching a starter their front office essentially begged for at the deadline, which itself tells you the read inside that clubhouse on the state of the visiting rotation. There's also the wrinkle of pure unfamiliarity. The rookie southpaw taking the ball for the home 9 is a name the opposing lineup has genuinely never seen live in a big league at bat. You can chart video all afternoon, but there's a real difference between studying tape and actually reading a young lefty's tempo when he's mixing his stuff on a humid August night in Queens. On the road, coming off a frustrating 1-run loss, that unfamiliarity gap only widens. Blend it with a lineup happy to work counts against pitchers who nibble around the zone, and the price sitting on the home team starts to feel quietly generous. As our first pick for this matchup, the New York Mets money line is our full game side pick. Shifting gears, this game shapes up a lot more like an old-school pitcher's duel than the fireworks display casual viewers usually want to watch. 2 lefties on the bump, both throwing in a spacious ballpark, both facing lineups that haven't exactly terrified opposing arms this year. Neither offense is stacked with left-handed pop that pulls the ball with authority, which matters because the corners at Citi Field don't play short even in warm August air. The humidity tonight doesn't come with much wind help either, so any long fly that does get crushed still has a long walk before it means anything on the scoreboard. Look, there's a version of this game where somebody drops a 5-run frame and the whole thesis melts, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Both starters have shown they can nibble themselves into trouble, and stranger things have happened when 2 clubs scrap for late-season leverage under the lights. But the shape of this specific matchup and the patterns quietly humming underneath it keep pulling the needle back toward suppression rather than eruption. When these two teams have squared off this season, 3 of their 4 meetings landed comfortably in low-scoring territory, and last night's tight defensive slugfest only added another log to that fire. The late innings picture points the same direction too. Both dugouts have been leaning on their leverage arms out of the pen, and neither group has been particularly generous once the starter hits the showers. That kind of endgame quality tends to strangle the final frames of a ballgame, which is a big part of why totals sink when 2 teams with legitimate pen depth meet in the second half. Roll it all together, the pitching profiles, the ballpark, the recent scoring pattern between these two clubs, and it starts feeling like the kind of night where the runs simply refuse to show up. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Atlanta Braves versus Minnesota Twins. Something shifted at Target Field on Monday night. For 11 straight meetings, the Minnesota club could not solve Atlanta, a stretch that had piled up since 2019. Then the Twins jumped Martin Perez for 4 runs in the first inning and never looked back, snapping the run in the loudest way possible. Momentum in baseball is a fickle thing, sure, but that is exactly the type of win that changes how a room walks into the next night. Now layer on the wrinkle that makes tonight even juicier. The right-hander taking the ball for Atlanta once wore Minnesota's uniform himself for parts of 2 seasons that got chewed up by injuries before the club moved on from him. He has been dazzling in his first 2 starts as a Brave, no doubt, but honestly, let us keep our heads on straight for a second. The Yankees lineup he carved up was patched together. The Mets club he handled has been slumping for weeks, and before those 2 cameo gems, he was carrying a 5.13 earned run average for a San Francisco team that had already decided it had seen enough. Regression is not some scary boogeyman, it is math. Asking a righty to keep painting corners in a 3rd straight outing, in a park he knows too well, against hitters who spent years being reminded he was shipped away, well, that is a big ask under a bright light. The other side of this ledger gets Byron Buxton back in the lineup after a quick injured list trip, plays with the urgency of a club still clinging to a wild card path, and hands the 9th inning to a closer who is a spotless 17 for 17 on save chances this season. Atlanta, for its part, has been just okay of late, hovering around break-even across its last 10, while working through a road stretch that opened with a punch to the mouth from the exact same opponent. Nobody is arguing which club is better in the big picture. The record at 74-50 versus 60-65 kind of speaks for itself. But this is one game, on this specific night, at Target Field, in front of a home crowd that just watched an 11-game curse get lifted before their eyes. Grabbing plus money on a home dog that already reminded itself it can hit these guys is the kind of ticket that ages well. As our first pick for this matchup, the Minnesota Twins money line is our full game side pick. Here is a night that looks built for the scoreboard operator to earn some overtime. Atlanta's order punishes small mistakes and shrugs off the big ones, and even during what has been a choppy month, the front of that lineup keeps producing runs the hard way. Ronald Acuna Jr. lined a 2-run single in the 5th of the opener that flipped the game's math in a hurry. Matt Olson keeps stacking professional at-bats one after another. Ozzie Albies has quietly climbed to 20 homers with plenty of runway left on the calendar. The right-hander throwing for Minnesota, on the other hand, has looked anything but shut down lately. His last outing coughed up 4 earned runs across 5 innings to a streaky Baltimore club. The turn before that got ugly enough in Milwaukee that he had to be pulled after 5 with a foot blister and a lead his teammates had to rescue with duct tape and prayers. His overall earned run average sitting in the mid-5s and a whip that runs north of 1.30 paints the picture of an arm that leaves too many strikes over the meat of the zone. That is not a great pairing against a lineup paid to punish those exact pitches. Flip the coin over. Minnesota's bats have found a pulse of their own the past couple of weeks. Josh Bell drove home 2 with a ground rule double to start the scoring in Monday's 4-run first, and then tacked on another hit for good measure. Cody Clemens matched him with a 2-hit night, which lately has felt more like the rule than the exception for him. Royce Lewis chipped in an RBI single, which is exactly the kind of chip in a lineup needs from its middle. Neither bullpen walks in spotless either, and the middle to late innings feel wide open on both benches in a game like this. Target Field will settle around the low 70s with a light north-northwest breeze that is neither shoving fly balls out nor knocking them down, so the sky is not going to bail the pitchers out tonight. The fair counter, of course, is that pitcher duels do happen when both starters find their stuff, and Atlanta's arm has been sharp in what is admittedly a thin 2-start sample. Even factoring that in, the shape of the visiting lineup, the recent pulse of the Twins' bats, and a pair of shaky middle relief groups tilts the board toward a livelier evening than the market wants to price. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Athletics versus Kansas City Royals. There's a moment in every long baseball season when you can just feel a matchup tilting one way, and this is one of them. The visitors are dragging themselves into Kansas City on the back end of a brutal stretch, and they're doing it without the guys who actually put the fear of God into opposing pitchers. Their power core has essentially been erased by injuries, with their all-star catcher, their thumping designated hitter, and a chunk of their supporting cast all watching from a training table somewhere. That's the backdrop, and honestly it matters more than any single stat line. The pitching matchup does the rest of the talking. Sacramento is rolling out an arm who's basically been target practice over his last handful of starts, coughing up crooked numbers at a clip that would make any manager wince. 3 straight outings with 5 or more earned runs. That's not a slump, that's a pattern setting in. And now he's walking into a lineup that just plated 9 the night before, in a ballpark where the summer humidity clings to you like a wet t-shirt and the ball has a habit of carrying. Meanwhile, on the other side, the home team just welcomed back a couple of everyday bats off the injured list, and both of them picked up more or less where they left off. The offense woke up. You could feel the energy shift at Kaufman. Guys chipping in up and down the order, contributions from returning pieces. The whole thing looked more like the version of this team folks expected to see coming out of spring. Now, look, the pitcher for the home side is stretching himself back into a starter's role after living in the bullpen for most of the year, and I won't sugarcoat it. His first 2 turns through the rotation didn't exactly go smoothly, but he's a lefty, he's got the crowd behind him, and the matchup he's walking into is not the Cubs or the Dodgers. It's a lineup missing its best power source, being asked to grind out at bats in muggy Midwest weather against a pitcher who has historically handled this particular opponent pretty well throughout his career. Even if he doesn't dominate, he doesn't have to. The pieces here just line up. Road team playing well below .500, coming off a loss, running out a starter carrying an earned run average in the 7s as a rotation guy, minus their most feared bats. Home team fresh off their most complete offensive game in a week, getting bodies back, playing in front of a Kaufman crowd that always shows up for a warm Tuesday night. It's the kind of spot where trying to be too clever gets you burned. As our first pick for this matchup, the Kansas City Royals money line is our full game side pick. Now shifting attention to how many runs are actually going to cross the plate here, and there's a real case building that this one has some juice to it. The visiting starter has been living dangerously with the long ball, serving up homers at a rate that's ballooned into something like 10 dingers over just a handful of recent starts. And Kaufman in mid-August is not exactly a pitcher's paradise, especially when the temperature is climbing toward the low 90s, and the air thickens up as the sun goes down. Warm, heavy air, a south wind that tends to help pull-side hitters, and a guy who has a nasty habit of leaving fastballs middle. You do the math on that one. Add to it that both bullpens, and I mean this with love, are pretty much cooked. The home side's relievers sit near the very bottom of the league in earned run average this year, and the visitors' pen has arguably been even worse since the calendar flipped to June. When 2 thin bullpens get called upon early, and both of these starters carry short leashes into the game, runs tend to pile up in a hurry as the innings drag on. That's just the nature of modern baseball once the relief corps is running on fumes. The home starter is another wrinkle worth mentioning here. He's been stretched into a rotation role after months of 1-inning relief work, and his pitch count is going to be capped early. That means the middle innings belong to the bullpen, and that's a favorable window for both offenses to keep tacking on. The visiting lineup, even shorthanded, has still shown some ability to jump on mistakes and turn them into damage. The home offense, meanwhile, is riding the wave of a 9-run night with returning hitters blending back into the daily mix. You could push back on this and argue that low-scoring games happen when 2 struggling clubs meet up. Fair point. Sometimes both bats no-show and the whole thing ends up something like 3-2. But the pieces here, the weather, the bullpens, the returning bats, the shaky starter on one side and the pitch-capped guy on the other, they all lean the same direction. When the humidity is doing what it does in Missouri in August, and neither staff has the depth to shut things down after the 5th, you tend to see numbers stack up on the scoreboard. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed. Subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.